Hey everyone, it's CL, and in today's video, we're gonna try not to rush, even though I am rushing a little bit because I'm trying to get this filmed before family comes home because it's just awkward, okay? Even though I did hit a milestone and filmed a little video in front of my dad, it is something I actually choose and prefer not to do because even though I was brave and I did it, I still don't feel comfortable. It's weird. I don't like it. It gives me anxiety. So even though we're talking about books today, I'm going to try to film this in a relatively quick time. So for today's video, what I kind of wanted to talk about today is regarding buying versus borrowing books. The reasons why I tend to buy books and the reasons why I will tend to borrow books. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the first thing that I jotted down is my reasons on why I would prefer to borrow books, and it's a very short list. But lately in my life, especially now that I am laid off, I'm trying to be really conservative as far as like my book buying. I just want to make sure that the money that I do have coming in, the money that I have for severance and the money that I have saved, that I'm spending it wisely. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to go buy books, because I definitely have already made a purchase, but it's just a matter of I am trying to overall borrow books more. So yeah. So as far as the reasons why I tend to borrow books is if the book is way too expensive. Now, most of the time, if a book is too expensive, it's because it's like a new release and the only cover that they have is like hardcover, and then that's one of the reasons why it will be like really expensive. And really expensive to me is like around $30. Once it hits the $30 range, I'm kind of like, I don't know, this is kind of expensive for a book, you know. Is this a book that I really want? But if it's just too expensive at like the retail store, I would much rather prefer to borrow it at my library. And at my library, they're pretty good. I mean, not all new releases they get their hands on, but a lot of the new releases that I'm interested in, it does become available fairly quickly, especially on their app, the Overdrive app, the electronic books, the digital books. It's the new releases. If it's a book that's popular, more than likely it's going to be available on the Overdrive app fairly quickly. So another reason why I would prefer to borrow books, if it's a book that I'm just trying out, maybe it's like a book genre that I'm not really sure if I like it, like when it comes to like romance books, when it comes to like certain other types of books, like maybe like biographies or something. If I'm not quite sure I'll be into it, if I'm not quite sure I'll be into that genre, then I tend to like borrow the books more. When I explore a genre, I tend to go to the library and just kind of walk through that area and sample a few types of books, and I feel better sampling in that way, exploring in that way versus buying, because if I don't like it, then I haven't lost anything, you know. I was able to try something, it didn't cost me anything. Whereas opposed to if I put money into something, if I buy a romance book and then come bring it home and I only end up reading like 10 pages because I'm not really getting into it, that's another thing that I just want to avoid. I don't want to put money into something if I cannot fully invest in it, you know. So I noticed that a lot of books that I tend to borrow consistently are like how-to books, are educational books, like those how-to books for dummies, like computer programming for dummies. I tend to borrow those because, one, if it's something that I just need temporarily, if it's something that I just need to acquire knowledge, maybe I just need to learn how to do a certain something, right? Maybe I need to learn how to use like QuickBooks or something, then I will borrow the book from the library and obtain that knowledge. And then once I have obtained that knowledge, I'll give the book back, but I still will have that knowledge within me, right? It's one of those things that once you learn it, you know it, like you'll know it going forward. So those are the types of books that I don't feel the need to purchase. One, because those how-to books and educational books can get on the pricey side, upwards of $30. Like I know those computer programming how-to books can range from like $40 to $60, just depending what it is, you know, because it also like comes with like supplemental material and the book tends to be very, very thick. But also like those dummy books, you know, once you go through one of those books, you don't really need to have it unless it's something that you feel like you need to reference, you know. But for myself, once I learn something, I tend to know it and can bring it with me going forward. Yeah. All right, so those are all the ones that I jotted down, like why I would tend to borrow books more. But then on the flip side of that, that doesn't mean that I will never purchase a book. Yes, I'm trying to use the library more, but there are certain situations where I would prefer to actually purchase the book. Now I'll go into my second list, which is reasons why I would tend to buy a book versus borrow. This first one is a little bit of a confession here. Probably the number one reason, and it's not a good reason, mind you, probably the number one reason why I might tend to buy a book versus borrowing is if it's like a spontaneous purchase. Maybe I went to Target to just get a handful of things that I need for the home, and then at Target they do have like a book section. If I browse the book section, and mind you, I know better, but sometimes I do end up over there, and then I see a book that seems interesting. There are times where I will just spontaneously buy it, like, oh, let me go ahead and check it out, and I put it in the cart. So spontaneous buys is one of the reasons why I would tend to buy a book. Like, it's not planned, it's just something I kind of bought on a whim and stuck it in my cart, and then it ended up home with me, you know, and now I own it. But now to get into like the real reasons, the reasons that are not related to spontaneous buying. If a book has a long wait, say it's a book that I really, really want to read, but the wait is incredibly long. For example, I really want to read that book by Bob Woodward. I'm trying to be patient. My library is going to get it in stock. But then I looked to see which place on hold I am to get this book. I am like 800th in line to read this book that is coming out in the next week or two, and I don't want to wait that long. I don't want for 800 people before me to read it and then it'll be my turn. I'm just not that patient, especially right now. I don't really have much to do, and all I'm doing is like watching the news and going to the gym, you know. But main thing is this is the type of stuff that's constantly on my mind. So when it came to that book that I really, really wanted, since there is such a very long wait, I decided to go ahead and purchase the book on Amazon, because even though my library had it, I'm too impatient to wait for my 800th place in line to read this book. Now, another reason I would tend to buy books versus borrowing is if the library is too far. There have been situations where I just couldn't get to the library. Growing up here at this house, there is a library nearby that's like a 10-minute drive, but there hasn't always been a situation where I can get down there. I don't think it's walkable distance, and honestly, the area that we're in is not like the safest place. You don't want to be walking down there by yourself, you know. It hasn't always been like a way I could get down there. Like, I haven't always had a car, and right now I don't have a car, but I have the opportunity to borrow my dad's car. I mean, there hasn't always been a scenario where I could always make it down to the library, and there hasn't always been an area where the library has been super close. So if I didn't have access to a library, whether it be regarding transportation or distance, then more than likely I would be purchasing all my books. Like, it would just be too unrealistic to make it down to the library and come back with all your books, like walking, you know. That's just, you're not going to be able to sustain that. So that is a period where I would tend to buy books versus borrowing. All right, so another reason why I would tend to buy a book versus borrowing is if the library doesn't have it. Now, my library has a lot of books that I'm interested in, but if it's a certain book by a certain author regarding a certain topic, and my library just doesn't have it, there's no other place around me where I can do like one of those interlibrary loans from another branch or something, then I will tend to buy the book because it's just not available to me, right? It's just not in my library. It's not in stock. They don't have it on their radar. Maybe there's that scenario where I want to read like a finance book based off a certain person who I deem is like successful and knows what they're talking about. And the library may have other books related to finance, but I'm very specific that I want this book by this author, and if they don't have it, then I will tend to buy it. So my next reason on why I would tend to purchase a book is if it's a sequel. Like, if it's a sequel to a series that I started and have fallen completely in love with. So there have been scenarios where I have borrowed a book, volume 1. I read it and I fall in love with it and I think a lot about it. It just left like a really good impression with me and I just loved it, right? We all have that feeling when we come across a book that we just love and can't stop thinking about and can't wait until the next installment comes out. We've all come across that before. So if I know that the sequel is coming out, and if it's a series that I feel like I love, I will purchase both the first copy and then the sequel that's coming out. I will purchase it and add it as part of my collection, because if I enjoyed it that much, I do want to own it and have it part of my very limited library here. And lastly, the last item that I jotted down here is one of the reasons I would tend to purchase a book versus borrow. If it's a book, it's kind of twofold. Yes, it's a book that I really enjoy and love, but not necessarily because it's like a series. Maybe it's not necessarily like the other one that I said. It's a series that I love. It's a story I love that's like fictional. Sometimes I will buy a book that is like a self-help book or something motivational, and I would prefer to own that because I want to like mark the pages, or maybe there are a lot of passages in there that speak to me. So a lot of books that I own that are more along the lines of like nonfiction, maybe it's self-help, right? There are a lot of books that I will return to, I will read often, but not to read cover to cover. It's more to flip towards my favorite passage, to flip towards my favorite quote. And those are the type of books I will tend to own, especially if there's a lot in there that I feel I can take from. That even though I read this motivational passage, I really like it, I really enjoyed it, it spoke to me, I want to be able to bookmark it, and then days down the line or months down the line, I want to be able to flip to it whenever I want to read my favorite passage. Maybe I need to like a pick-me-up, maybe there's something I'm writing and I want to pull a quote from it. So there are those types of books that I want to own, even though I'm not reading cover to cover. It's because there are certain passages, favorite quotes, that I still want to keep and have like readily available to me for easy access. Those are my two lists regarding why I would borrow and why I would buy. But the majority, I would say 90% of the books that I am reading or trying to read, currently 90% are borrowed from the library. There's a very select few that I'm actually purchasing. That's my list. Let me know down in the comments below what you think. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later.